Okay, hi everyone. My name's Miranda, and I'm going to talk today about microaggressions. There we go. My why. I think awareness is important. That is something kind of obvious with all of the topics in this class. Um, but especially, I was just talking about microaggressions the other day with my friend. She's applying to grad school and is looking to work in the deaf community. And one of the questions that they asked her is, what are some microaggressions that you think that you could see either at this school or that you yourself commit? Um, and it was one that caused her to think about it, because it's one of those things that isn't necessarily prevalent on our minds. And so just maybe taking a minute to prioritize, to rethink and recognize our position, um, especially because we don't want to offend or hurt people anywhere around us. That's obviously a key part of social work. So for the sociological aspect, I grabbed an article from, or a journal from the American Psychology Association. And so with this, they essentially had done a study. They gathered um, data from a bunch of other studies that were done. And what they wanted to know was how microaggressions affected people's well being, their lives, and their adjustment. Um, and so they looked with a diverse demographic of people, collected data from different sources to see what effect microaggressions had on people. And what they found is that it showed empirical support for associations between racial, LGBTQ, and health status microaggressions and adjustment outcomes. So essentially, that being in a position where you are experiencing microaggressions, whether that be racial minority, sexual orientation minority, whatever it may be, and experiencing these microaggressions in your day to day and just kind of having to be like, okay, that's part of my life, which is awful to have to kind of justify. Um, it said that it's proven effects on their mental health, their um, their adjustment to the workplace, in relationships with other people. We saw it having a significant enough negative impact. And so that just kind of made me think, not only are we with these microaggressions, either, I think in most cases it is non-intentional, but sometimes intentional, promoting racism, homophobia, etc. Um, but we're so not only are these people having to hear this and feel these offenses, but also it's affecting their quality of their day-to-day life. For my news article, there was an article from NPR, and it was essentially saying, what are microaggressions? How can you recognize them? And what are ways to handle them? And it focused a lot on having conversations about heavier topics, and being mindful of what microaggressions could be made there. So the person that wrote this article gave 3 tips as to what they felt people should keep in mind when going forward into politically, socially, whatever charged conversations. So the first that they said was to do your own work. Nobody wants to feel like they have to do homework for you. So especially if you're trying to enter a realm where you are not the, or how should I phrase this? Essentially, when you're trying to talk about a subject that doesn't involve yourself, it's important that you know what you're talking about so that you don't accidentally commit a microaggression or just flat out aggression. So they say to do your own work, don't depend on other people to educate you, because that's an extra burden that nobody deserves. But also be proactive about it, right? Don't just choose to be ignorant because you don't want to do the work. The other one is to set realistic expectations from certain conversations. So, just know, okay, is my goal here to learn, or is my goal here to try to convince, or what am I doing? What do I want out of this interaction? That way it can help you to kind of target um, your language and think how you can be more careful with your words. And the last thing that they said was um, be mindful of your own mental health, but also think about your role and your positionality. So everyone has different experiences, different backgrounds um, that feed into everything that we do. And so it's important to be aware that where you're coming from might prevent you from seeing eye to eye with someone simply because you have a different position in life, which really sways and affects your take on different topics. So I thought that was really interesting. NASW, so I highlighted the value of integrity, which says that social workers are continually aware of the profession's missions, values, ethical principles, and ethical standards, and practice in a manner consistent with them. Um, Social workers act honestly and responsibly and promote ethical practices on part of the organizations with which they are affiliated. So I just think of integrity as kind of like social responsibility of, I think it ties in with microaggressions because part of a social worker's job is to interact with a number of people, and we need to remember to stand for, these good ethical principles and values that we have and that we've been taught as social workers. And I think that obviously goes to include being careful with what we say and making sure people feel comfortable and safe in an environment that we're providing. Okay. Comparison. So I think between the two, it's kind of interesting to see the science of saying there is a proven negative impact that microaggressions have on people. And it affects their adjustment and it affects the way that they're living life, right? That's what the scientific article said. And then the news article talking about, well, you can't just be a shut-in, you have to also interact with people day to day. So just try to be aware of the insulting things that might be said accidentally. And so I think we see this mesh of, okay, recognize that it is something hurtful. So also like do your part. That was like the first tip with the news article. Do your homework, do your part to make sure that you are not adding to the negativity in the world. Because we don't want to turn away from society. We want to be engaged in it and make it better and make it a safe and happy place for people to live in. And so, with the scientific knowledge that, okay, this is something that's detrimental to society, and then also this news article saying, hey, society, this is something that's going on. They didn't reference any of the data or any of the science side of it, but also recognizing it as something to be aware of and just kind of meshing those and saying, okay, hey, this is something important, this is detrimental, but also we need to be active members in our society. So here's how we can do that to promote awareness and promote kindness. And then my question for you is, how do we monitor microaggressions? So do you think it's more of the correction after one has been made that we should put emphasis on, or should we put emphasis on the education or somewhere in between? What do you think is the best way to kind of avoid the hurtful effect that they have on society? And then my references. And that is it. Thank you.